Of the CBC serving Quebec.
This has affected me mentally, physically, and financially. I've tried to work 3 months wearing this on the job.
You mean actually wearing it?
Yes,
no,
sir.
What's it look like?
It looks like something from Mars.
I mean, you actually worked in your job wearing that?
Yes, sir, at my desk. And I ended up in the hospital on the verge of a mental and physical breakdown.
So you go home and you sit in your room and you cry and you say, "Dear God, please, what is this thing that I have? Doesn't anybody know? Isn't there an answer someplace?"
My whole lifestyle has been changed. I no longer have the job. I have to stay home. I cannot go out to eat. We don't go bowling anymore. When I make a trip, I have to plan things so that I run from people.
They totally gave up. And then I went to another doctor. And then finally one doctor had the sense to begin to look into allergies.
Allergies, sensitivities, hay fever, asthma. Our bodies responding in an unnatural way to our environment, to things we breathe, eat, and touch. For those who have become unusually sensitive to bombardment by foreign substances, 20th century technology has brought special hazards. In addition to dust, mold, and pollens, the potent chemical byproducts of our industrial environment menace the sensitive and susceptible among us. What happens when allergy strikes? What is an allergy?
An allergy is an inflammation. What causes inflammation is a combination of a material, which is allergenic, and something in the body which has developed as a result of previous contact. If you have the inherited tendency for the most part, you develop this kind of inflammation, which may be hay fever or asthma or skin rashes or stomach upsets and so on.
8-year-old Lynn Cullen has had asthma since infancy. Some attacks have been life-threatening, requiring emergency treatment. At Toronto's Hospital for Sick Children, Dr. Collins Williams is testing the degree to which her breathing is impaired by asthma. Whether they live in the city or the country, many asthmatics, like Lynn, are affected by pollens from grasses, weeds, and trees. The pollen grains, along with other allergenic materials, enter the bronchial passages and, falling on susceptible tissue, set in motion the allergic reaction. This causes inflammation, resulting in uncomfortable and potentially disabling constriction of the breathing passages. For Lynn's breathing, the peak flow meter shows her asthma is under control for now. Margaret A. Young suffers from hay fever. In Dr. Alan Knight's Toronto clinic, she's being skin tested to determine what sets off her allergies. Ragweed, tree, and grass pollen extracts are pricked into her skin.
And that'll react with these materials.
Hay fever victims are especially susceptible to these common pollens. When grains of the offending pollens are breathed in, allergens enter the bloodstream, triggering an overreaction of the immune system. Antibodies, called IgE, attached to the surface of certain cells, stimulate them when the pollen invades to produce inflammation-causing chemicals. The result? An allergic reaction. Fluid-filled blisters on Margaret A. Young's arm.
Miss A. Young has quite a wheal, which is a kind of a blister. It's full of water. This was the grass pollen, and she shows again quite a vigorous reaction. And here is the ragweed pollen with, again, a very vigorous reaction with a central swelling. And I'm sure, Margaret, that's itchy.
Yes, it is.
Yes, quite itchy. And that will take about...
Allergy sufferers are prey to many other ordinary substances, to dust of various kinds, even to the tiny mites living among particles of house dust, to familiar pets, to houseplants, mold, and numerous other common contacts of everyday living. To protect her from recurring asthma attacks, Lynn is given a powdered drug which she draws into her lungs through the spinhaler. For hay fever, allergy shots are often prescribed. Injections of weak solutions of the very substances causing the trouble, helping the body's immune system to react in a more normal way.
I would think she would do very well with what's called hyposensitization. I would hyposensitize her to pre-pollen specifically and give her the short course of 3 injections against grass and 4 injections against ragweed, and I think we should see a significant improvement.
So you just show me how you take it?
A second, more powerful inhaled drug helps keep Lynn's asthma under control. A task made more difficult because she's susceptible to many other things than pollens and dust. Perfume, for example.
Well, when anyone has any perfume on, I just feel like I'm scared that I'll start coughing or I'll get sick again.
What does it do to you?
It makes me get all wheezy and makes me start coughing.
Such common odors as perfume and tobacco smoke, though not allergens by strict medical definition, bring about discomfort, suffering, and debilitating illness for those as sensitive as Lynn.
I don't like it because it makes me get my eyes water and I get puffy and I start coughing and sneezing.
What do you call it when she reacts to things like perfume and cigarette smoke?
Well, we call those non-allergic or non-specific stimuli, but they can be just as important as the allergic stimuli, and in some patients with asthma are much more important than the allergies.
Some who are susceptible may react most severely to causes not generally labeled by doctors as allergenic. What are the sources of these substances in our environment which can impair our health, limit our ability to live normally, and threaten us with discomfort and illness? Dr. Alan Knight.
Well, the environment certainly is a major cause of symptoms of, again, the nose and the chest, and no better example than a disorder where people will inhale sap or chemicals from a particular wood like western red cedar or from pine and get quite severe symptoms. And this is a major industrial hazard.
A major industrial hazard. Canadian scientists have proven that workers in western red cedar, asthma-free to begin with, can develop the disease, which may then be with them for the rest of their lives.
People can become allergic to or sensitized to things that they're exposed to at work, and that can turn asthma on. The things include very commonly some of the highly reactive chemicals that are used in the plastics and paint, rubber industries like isocyanate.
Rubber, paint, plastics, other industrial environments where asthma can be permanently triggered.
One point that I think is important to remember is that there's a fairly large portion of our population. We don't know exactly how many people. It might be in the order of tens of thousands of people that seem to be chemically sensitive. And they're sensitive to a lot of chemical compounds, many of which we can't even identify or our instruments can't even measure properly, but they seem to have allergic responses to it.
If, as Harvard's Professor Spengler says, a large number of people are chemically sensitive, what happens when they're exposed to substances they cannot tolerate?
I was a very healthy individual, a good athlete, and I was exposed to insecticide. Because I was so healthy, it took other exposures too, a gas leak and then an oil leak. And finally, after having an operation, the anesthesia just set it off to such an extent that I became so ill that I couldn't move the left side of my body. My vascular system was affected to such an extent that I'd be affected, my vision, my hearing. It was just impossible for me to live a normal life.
For many people, there is a hereditary predisposition, and then come a series of triggers. The most common trigger that I hear about in the office is a chemical overexposure, like moving into a new office building and getting a nose full of formaldehyde very heavily on a steady basis. or an industrial accident, or having the house pesticided, visited by the exterminator and having it hopelessly contaminated by some kind of pesticide treatment.
Chemical pesticides are often complex and very toxic materials. What happens in the human body when disease results from exposure to chemicals in the environment? Studies in the development of hyperirritability of the skin at St. Michael's Hospital, Toronto, are described by Dr. James Nethercott.
We see this in human beings who develop severe problems with their skin, with widespread eczema, wherein they develop very hyper-irritable skin. It may be very difficult for us to carry out tests to determine why, because they begin to show reactions to a whole host of things that they're exposed to.
Sensitized by one chemical, the skin may become reactive to many other substances.
And a person may develop sensitivity to a given substance such that their skin becomes hyperreactive, and subsequently exposure to many things that they handle, soap, solvents, and so on, that they might be exposed to may reproduce this problem.
The massive exposure triggers off a lot of hidden underground sensitivities. I like to compare it to an iceberg. 1/8 of the iceberg is the presenting complaint there, and this may be relatively minor. The 7/8 of the submerged iceberg represents that person's potential for the rest of their life of hidden sensitivities. And if they get a massive dose, it may trigger the whole issue. And they become sensitized to many things in the environment which they previously tolerated very well.
The role of these hidden sensitivities in learning and behavioral disorders is a controversial subject among medical specialists. These childhood problems, which may be triggered by common foods as well as chemicals, are of concern to allergist Dr. Doris Rapp.
Some of these children will have A's one day and F's the next day. They'll be able to study fine until there's lunch or a birthday party, and then suddenly they can't concentrate, they can't think anymore, they can't sit still. Many times when they're having a reaction, their ears get red, their cheeks get red, they get dark circles under their eyes, they get a glazed and glassy look to their eyes. And what the teacher notices is that the handwriting changes. It'll be nice and uniform, and suddenly it's very large and irregular, or sometimes it becomes very contracted and small.
It's okay, Michael. It's okay.
In her Buffalo clinic, Dr. Rapp sees many children whose families suspect their behavioral and learning problems are linked to foods and chemicals. She investigates environmental causes of illness using methods not generally accepted by orthodox specialists. Some tests involve the study of reactions to foods. Another procedure requires injection into the skin of precisely measured amounts of suspect chemicals or foods. Billy Sheff, unknown to himself or his mother, is being tested for sensitivity to milk.
You don't want to see the unicorn?
Lynette Garcia is being injected with a solution of tuna fish, also kept secret during the test from mother and patient. Since he was 11 months old, Billy has suffered episodes of hyperactivity, nasal stuffiness, and skin rash. Lynette also has frequent bouts of hyperactivity, which manifest in crankiness, crying, and long periods of sleeplessness. Both children are now beginning to react to the foods with which they are being tested. Further injections of more and more dilute solutions of the original extracts are given in order to find the precise amount which will stop the reaction. Until that exact concentration is found, the children will continue to react as on other occasions when they are exposed to that food or chemical, providing a cynical demonstration of childhood suffering and parental anxiety.
What's happening?
She's having a reaction to something.
Lynette and Billy have now reached the peak of their reaction. The From this point on, the treatment dose will gradually bring them back to a more normal state.
So what difference has it made to you and to him to have the treatment?
Well, without treatment, there's no way he could go to school. There's no way that he could get himself out the door every day. Right now, he has to go to the babysitters. And some days, he's just not ready to go out the door in the morning.
If they're properly treated and this happens to be the cause of their problem, their grades go from F's to A's. They can sit quietly. They start to learn. The teacher says, I can't believe it's the same child.
Billy's treatment dose has been established. His reaction apparently turned off. Lynette, too, now seems a different child.
What's your situation now?
She's being a nice, normal child.
What brought that about?
She found her correct treatment dose after being tested.
And what did you do for her?
I've been testing her for tuna fish. I'm excited we've got new food now. I presume it's a food. They haven't told me exactly what. I presume it's a food. I'm excited that there's one less item that he's going to eat that'll cause this kind of a problem for him. And he's real good about taking his dosages.
Oh, thank you. She loves tuna fish. She likes it, and it's one of the few proteins that I thought she was okay on.
So how do you feel about that?
I'm glad they tested her for it, because I give it to her once a week.
I was on the verge of a nervous breakdown. I had had too many breakdowns. And I was on the verge of a complete breakdown just before we got help for him.
Help away from the clinic takes the form of drops of the treatment dose under the tongue. What foods cause the most problems?
In my experience, the food that concerns me more than any other food is milk. I find that milk in infants causes colicky. Babies don't smile. They drool more than normal. They become irritable. They can't sleep. In the toddler, we find that they have temper tantrums. They have one ear infection after another. Their legs ache. In the older child, I find it can cause hyperactivity, behavior problems, diarrhea, constipation, vomiting mucus, bad breath. In adults, it causes fatigue. And many children or adults know that they don't like milk. They won't drink it. They had trouble when they were an infant. But they love cheese and ice cream and butter and whipped cream and yogurt. And these are the things that are continuing to make these patients ill.
Milk, like many other foods, may go unrecognized as a source of allergy, since it's often difficult to identify what's causing the problem. There are ways for allergy sufferers to find out for themselves which foods make them ill.
How did you find out what foods you were allergic to?
I did what's called the challenge technique, where you eliminate it for a week and then have a meal, only a bit, on an empty stomach. And any symptoms you have will manifest themselves. I challenged milk, and I had a glass of milk on an empty stomach, and I was practically incoherent. I was crying. I was acting like a 3-year-old when I was 16.
In milk allergy, I can have people come in with histories of headaches. They will come in with histories of diarrhea, vomiting, chronic coughs, recurrent earaches, recurrent sore throats, all kinds of weird things that you've never seen to attribute to milk ordinarily.
Foods that cause reactions often are those most commonly eaten and best liked. But when the culprits have been discovered, what can be done to prevent further bouts of illness?
When you found out what foods you reacted to, what did you do about it?
Well, I eliminated those foods that made me sick, and the rest I kept rotating on a 4-day diet so that I wouldn't become sensitized to them as well. And later on, when I found that I could have little bits of the foods that had made me sick before, I worked them into the rotation diet.
In the rotation diet, the trouble causers are left out. Others eaten no oftener than once every 4 days, providing a varied menu and avoiding the ones proven to be a constant source of illness. Illness has plagued 9-year-old Brittany Allred since infancy. Day after day, she has suffered debilitating epileptic seizures. Visits to many doctors, treatment at many clinics have been of little help. Now, at the end of a long search, she's at a clinic in Oklahoma City being tested for sensitivity to foods and chemicals. A short time after finishing her test meal, Brittany begins to show the telltale signs of epilepsy. The rapidly blinking eyes and twitching muscles, symptoms of petit mal seizure. A few minutes later, as the reaction progresses, she experiences a familiar pattern of discomfort, weakness, and fatigue. In half an hour, symptoms resembling those of grand mal epileptic seizure begin to appear. Psychiatrist Dr. William Philpott investigates environmental causes of mental and physical illness, an approach called clinical ecology, not generally accepted by orthodox specialists. Other foods and chemicals previously tested on Brittany have produced similar and even more marked reactions.
Okay, don't cry. Just relax.
As Brittany suffers through the test, her mother finds encouragement in the results.
Before we got here, she could hardly talk because oftentimes she would have such trouble talking when she concentrated. She would have the blinks and the petit mal seizures. So concentrating was very hard, or talking. So since we've been here, when we've got her on the foods that didn't bother her, it was amazing how much better she got. And then she was on 13 pills a day when we got here, and right now she's on half a pill. So it's just remarkable. I just am filled with hope.
What's the value of this treatment for Brittany? How will it help her?
I just think that we can find ways that she can live a normal life that she couldn't have otherwise.
What's that mean to you?
Oh, it means everything.
At institutions practicing traditional allergy, clinical ecology is controversial. Dr. Alan Knight.
Well, the only comment I could make is that it's utter nonsense. That has no scientific validity, that their testing methods are sort of uselessly weak and ill-defined, and their treatment programs totally without scientific basis.
Well, I'm very disturbed about it. I think it definitely has to be recognized as completely different from allergy, because we have a lot of scientific basis for the practice of allergy. But the people that are doing clinical ecology to a large extent are using unproven techniques, and they don't seem terribly concerned in getting proof for what they're doing.
The methods of clinical ecology are known to me for the simple reason that I've taken a course in it. I find that although the individuals who practice clinical ecology have, I think, very good ideas and very good intentions, the particular materials with which they work and the methods that they work with them probably do not stand up to credibility. They cannot be proven time and time again.
How do you know that?
Basically from studies that other people have done, as well as the fact that I cannot get it to work.
There are certain methods, such as putting drops under the tongue as a form of treatment, which remain unproven. The practitioners who claim that these are effective have an obligation, in my view, to provide objective proof, and that, to my knowledge, has never been done, nor does there seem to be an inclination to do so.
Well, clinical ecologists, by and large, have overcome their medical education. The conventional allergist has not. He still believes what his teacher taught him, and yet everybody in medical education admits that the half-life of medical education is 4 years, meaning that half of everything that you learn in medical school is either outdated or wrong at the end of 4 years. And the only problem is we don't know which half. So I have to express tremendous admiration for the small group of clinical ecologists, because they have overcome that dehumanizing education they received in medical school.
Allergist Dr. Phyllis Safer. Why this medical disagreement?
I think a lack of understanding on the part of those who practice conventional allergy, because about 7 years ago I was in the same boat. People used to come and tell me that they would get sick in department stores or that perfume really made them dreadfully ill, or they couldn't stand wearing synthetic clothing. I used to look at them as if they were some kind of freaks. I didn't know what they were talking about. And then after education on meeting Dr. Randolph and Dr. Ray, I learned what this problem was about. So all I can say is the gap is the result of ignorance.
One common chemical suspected of causing many health problems is formaldehyde. It's used in building materials such as particle board, plywood, and insulation. Formaldehyde is in electrical wiring, paper products, and insecticides. It's used to make carpets, drapery and upholstery fabrics, and permanent press clothing.
I think one of the major triggers of illness I see in people today is formaldehyde in new office buildings and new apartment buildings. It's probably one of the major sources of my business these days, because I get people who have moved into brand new office buildings or brand new apartments with new carpets, new drapes, finished with formaldehyde, which is supposed to be a fabric strengthener. And it outgasses for years. No question it is a sensitizer. I mean, that's well established. That's in the literature. And that it sets off this illness.
Joe and Lynn Colazzi had their house insulated with urea formaldehyde foam. It was installed in all the outside walls of their wood frame house under a program subsidized by the Canadian government. A few months later, Lynn became seriously ill. She describes how the disease affected her.
Well, definitely fainting, passing out was one of the most frightening things for me. And afterwards, I'd go into convulsive shudders. And that was really scary.
I observed an enthusiastic lady deteriorate in front of my eyes. A girl who was going swimming every day and losing her strength.
The intense headaches, the pain in my spine, and right through the joints of my body were really severe. And that was very difficult for me.
And here was a person who was a healthy person, a few months ago. That's what I observed. And when you're in a situation like that, you don't know what to think. You just react from day to day. It was a horrendous experience.
And we went to a cottage, and I started to get better. Those symptoms disappeared very quickly for me. I still was very weak and sick, but I started to recover.
And when you went home again, what happened?
Well, within 24 hours, I was virtually bedridden again. I'd had several fainting attacks, and I just felt wretched.
The Colazzis sold their house and bought another nearby which had no foam insulation. Their furniture, rugs, and drapes had to be steam cleaned to remove all traces of contamination from the foam. Still quite ill, Lynn went to Chicago, referred by her doctor to Henrotin Hospital for more specialized treatment in the clinic of Dr. Saron Randolph. Dr. Randolph is a modern pioneer in the diagnosis and treatment of environmental illness.
How are you doing?
Patients are isolated in a special section of the hospital, free from atmospheric contamination, where they are tested for their reactions to suspected allergenic materials, including chemicals and foods.
Oh, boy.
What was the value of the Randolph Clinic in the case of Lynn Colazzi?
Well, first of all, I regained some physical strength because I was so weak that I was almost bedridden all the time. And that was important so that I could, again, try to cope with an ordinary environment. They sorted out foods that I was allergic to and found some that were safe. They tested me for chemicals and inhalants, and I was given some protective serum. And I learned a lot about how to look after my own problems myself.
What's your feeling about the contribution of the Randolph Clinic?
Well, it saved my wife's life. There was no doubt about that. She left. I took her on the plane to Chicago in a wheelchair. And my cousin met us there, and he just couldn't believe it. And we literally took her. She was bedridden. That's how I took her down to the hospital. She came back to me on her own steam, walking, healthy, a smiling young lady.
Compared to last year, it just seems like a miracle to me how much stronger I'm getting day by day by following the program that I learned in Dr. Randolph's clinic.
In a Montreal suburb, another family, the Ursakis, had the foam installed. Their house, now being rebuilt, had to be torn down to its foundations to get rid of the offending gases. Paul and Lorraine Ursaki and their 2 young sons all became ill not long after being exposed to the foam. How were they affected?
Dizziness, tiredness, breathing problem, itchy eyes, just being generally tired.
Difficulty in breathing, all the time headache. I feel tired almost every time, all the time, and I had arthritis. Those was the most problem I had.
Did you have arthritis before the foam?
No, I never did. I had arthritis before the foam. It was just when the foam was put a few months after.
Ryan, what did you experience?
Well, my nose was always bleeding, and my eyes was always itching. I couldn't stand light.
At St. Justine's Hospital in Montreal, the Ursakis' case was studied by Dr. Zave Chad.
The timing of the appearance of the symptoms, although non-specific, and the installation of the urea formaldehyde in their house would lead one to conclude that there is a relationship between these symptoms and the urea formaldehyde vapors.
An industrial application of the foam also had unfortunate consequences. Factory owner Joseph Kiss.
Well, I have installed it in my plant over here behind me, and basically we have installed 28,000 cubic feet of it all over the wall.
What happened?
Well, after about 18 months, by accident we find out that the foam totally broke down, became a mush type of substance, and we have to remove it.
Disintegrated foam, no longer an insulator, now an expensive liability.
How much did that cost?
Over $127,000. Well, after I started working here, I developed some heavy coughing, and I didn't know what really caused it, and we just got aware of it after when we find out there was some bad insulation in the building, and it's not just me. Some of the other workers here complained about different headaches and so on.
Well, after they put the foam in, I began to notice a change in my breathing. It became more difficult to breathe, and even after leaving the plant and getting home, I still noticed that my lungs weren't breathing as freely as they should. And I've noticed a difference ever since it's been removed. I don't have the problem anymore. It's a lot clearer.
Well, I also installed the foam 6 months later in my house, and I had to remove it from my house as well.
Why?
My wife and my little daughter experienced nasal and breathing problems.
What about the breathing?
Well, I had to take special medicines for my nose, and every time I breathed, my tummy hurted.
I often had nosebleed due to it, and I couldn't sleep at night or couldn't breathe. It was very hard. And like when I went to remove it on the inside of the house, I did handle it without gloves, and I did have a big rash all over my arms.
The Kiss family, though convinced the foam was the cause, were never able to find a doctor who would identify the source of their problems.
We took her to doctors, and they always said that there was nothing. They couldn't see nothing wrong with her, but she always felt bad about it.
And now that the foam is gone, how do you feel?
I feel better.
Mrs. Kiss, now that the foam is gone, how do you feel?
I feel a lot better.
Medical opinion is sharply divided on the foam as a cause of illness.
I think that the health effects have been grossly exaggerated. I think that so-called disease or illness related to formaldehyde or possibly other miasms that have been attributed to formaldehyde or its breakdown products or interaction with building products, that all of these things are quite unproven.
There's no question that we have received cases of formaldehyde poisoning. We have measured formaldehyde in the home of these individuals, and they cannot live there. It's impossible to live in those homes.
Dr. Donovich, how do you respond to this concern about health hazards to people in foam-insulated homes?
I think it is greatly overplayed. And consider that there are new chemicals, there are new substances to which people are exposed every day that we don't have a long history, and we don't know what their biological effects are. And here we are preoccupied with something that's been around 50 years, and it doesn't seem to be much of a problem. I think we're putting our preoccupation in the wrong place.
We have cases of young infants with nose bleeding. They are, of course, live in the home almost 24 hours a day. They breathe formaldehyde continuously, and since they breathe exclusively through their nose, and formaldehyde is highly soluble in water, it is picked up entirely by the nose of these young infants. They cannot breathe through their mouth like adults do. Also, these young infants have much more sensitive mucous membrane in the nose, as well as much more sensitive skin than adults have, and it has created great problems in this area.
What about its use in Europe? What's the situation there?
I was just in Europe, and I have been unable to find any concern with this material at all.
As far as health is concerned?
As far as health is concerned.
Well, they have the same problem with formaldehyde in Europe. It's been well documented in the medical literature. Cases have been reported from Denmark. They've been reported from Italy. So urea formaldehyde is a universal problem, not a Canadian problem.
That the foam is a real health threat was officially acknowledged when the Canadian government imposed a total ban on its use.
In December 1980, an order to ban the sale of urea foam was made by the government, and that was based on health studies which had been carried out over the last few years before that, which had showed adverse effects in homeowners, problems with the problem of carcinogenicity in rodent tests, concern about the growth of pathogenic fungi in homes so insulated.
I think the ban was unscientific.
You disagree with it?
Totally.
The United States government, a few months later, also issued a nationwide ban.
The United States Consumer Product Safety Commission in February decided to ban urea formaldehyde foam insulation from residences as well as in schools.
Why was this decision taken?
Well, it was a very tough decision. The basic reason for the decision was that it caused adverse health effects. And the major problem the United States consumer had was they didn't know that they had a problem, unfortunately, until it was too late, until the insulation was actually in the walls of either the home or the school.
At Laval University in Quebec, hundreds of case histories of health effects from the foam are being studied by Director of Toxicology, Dr. Albert Nantel.
We have hundreds of well-documented cases by very competent physicians, and I'm not talking of myself, I'm talking of a competent specialists who have examined individuals or families who have demonstrated that they had severe health problems, and that those symptoms were all disappearing when people were taken out of the homes and reappeared when people went back in their homes.
At Harvard University in Boston, further studies on people exposed to the foam have been done by Dr. Mark Schenker.
We did a number of tests on patients who came into the Brigham and Women's Hospital from homes with urea formaldehyde foam insulation. And the tests were set up to cover a spectrum of findings, including skin changes, respiratory changes, and neuropsychiatric complaints. And I think the surprising finding was that a very large number of people showed abnormalities of neuropsychiatric changes in the testing.
Well, I'm concerned mainly because we have thousands of families who are exposed to that product, that a significant proportion of those families are showing moderate to severe health effects.
Their complaints were of a nature of memory difficulty very prominently, and also headaches, and some complained of depression. And on formal testing, what we found was that, in fact, memory storage was normal, but they showed abnormalities in attention span or ability to sustain attention. And also, a large number showed abnormalities in depression scales in formal testing.
Now officially recognized by governments, health problems suffered by those in foam-insulated homes are still denied by some doctors. But what of the possible long-range effects, Dr. Nantel?
How can you really be sure that they won't have long-range effects, that they don't already have effects very serious on their children and on pregnant women, on older people? How are you going to secure them? How are you going to explain to them that they are so sick, but it's only in their head, that there's nothing real to that?
While doctors debate the riddle of illness from urea formaldehyde, homeowners have been forced to take drastic and expensive measures. Medical theories and controversies have offered little comfort to those who have lost their homes and their health. Both misfortunes have plagued the Ersaki family.
Part of our family, our son of 5 years old, succumbed to cancer.
Kevin Ersaki at first suffered many of the same symptoms experienced by other members of the family. Then he became more seriously ill, and finally, cancer was diagnosed.
We thought that, we never put the two together, really. It's just that studies by doctors, by St. Justin's, etc., led us to believe that there was a 2 and a 2 and made 4. And we said, this is our problem.
Well, with Kevin was a very healthy boy until we put the foam. And as soon as we put the foam in January, in spring he started to be sick. Now that we look back, with all the signs with the foam, he started having hard time to breathe, bloody nose. All his skin peeled, like his hand and his feet. The skin was all peeling.
Already we have observed a certain number of a certain type of cancer, which is a lymphoma, which is quite a rare type of cancer. We cannot state that it is related yet, but it is certainly one of the aspects of the study that will be done.
These animal studies in Dr. Nantel's laboratory are designed to determine more precisely the health effects of formaldehyde and other components of the foam. Earlier experiments in other laboratories have proven formaldehyde to be a cancer-causing agent.
My more pressing concern relates to the carcinogenic effects of formaldehyde, which outgasses from the urea formaldehyde insulation. I think that the evidence on the carcinogenicity of formaldehyde is unequivocal. We have excellent animal data and some less substantive but not trivial human data. And it is clear that exposure to formaldehyde represents a substantial hazard from increased cancer risks.
Following his diagnosis of cancer in March, Kevin Ersaki went into hospital to receive chemotherapy and other forms of cancer treatment. He died on December 27th.
As in all cases, it's a dreaded disease, and when we found out, we just fell apart. We couldn't believe that a child, 5 years old, of course we were ignorant to the fact that children got cancer. We always related this to elderly people. We were astonished. There's no words that could explain how we felt.
Well, every time I saw him sicker and sicker, I always thought that was like a joke. But when he really got sick and when I knew he was going to die, I wasn't joking anymore.
Do you miss him?
A lot. I remember everything that it did wrong to him, and I wish I could all start all over again.
Formaldehyde, petrochemicals, and certain foods caused life-threatening illness for Mrs. Betsy Kavner of Ann Arbor, Michigan. Her health now much improved, she lives in a specially constructed, environmentally safe house with her family. 2 years ago, her illness had reached a crisis. Her physician, Dr. Paula Davey.
She was very ill. She'd been running high fevers, severe bowel cramps, diarrhea for many years, and had wasted down to about 79 pounds when I first saw her.
I was almost totally obstructed in 4 segments of my bowel, and I knew as a nurse that meant I was going to have my bowel removed, because when you get that bad and the obstruction is that bad, they have to take out part of your bowel in order for food to be able to pass through.
Betsy was sick an awful lot. It meant that several days a week she'd be seriously incapacitated by her illness, have great difficulty cooking or taking care of the children. I had to do a lot of those things, or have other people come in and help us with those things.
What were the causes of Betsy Kavanaugh's illness?
In her case, it was milk, grains, and petrochemicals were the major ones.
Well, when I was ill, I really thought that eventually I was going to die in a matter of a short number of years. I thought that probably what would happen is I'd just lose portions of my bowel bit by bit, that probably in 5 years I'd end up with a colostomy, a permanent colostomy. I thought that probably I wouldn't have any children, and that I would just be an invalid for the rest of my life.
Dr. Davey, what was your concern as to the outcome of Betsy Kavanaugh's illness if she didn't receive prompt treatment to bring it under control?
I was concerned that it actually might lead to her death. She was very, very ill.
Responding to Betsy Kavanaugh's medical emergency, Dr. Davey arranged for her to be transferred to a hospital clinic in Dallas, Texas. Located in Carleton Hospital, the clinic specializes in treating patients with environmental illness using clinical ecology methods, some of which are controversial among orthodox practitioners. The director of the clinic is Dr. William Ray, a cardiovascular surgeon. The clinic is designed to provide an atmosphere as free as possible from environmental contaminants. The air is filtered. The drinking water is free of additives and toxic chemicals. Some patients have developed such severe hypersensitivity they must be protected from subtle chemical odors like those given off by books or newsprint. Former nursing instructor Carla Meyer suffered from chemical and food sensitivities so severely that she was no longer able to lead a normal life. A series of complex tests undertaken at the clinic were beginning to identify some of the causes of her illness.
What does it mean to find a place like this?
Oh, it's like an answer to a prayer. Somebody really, is beginning to figure it out. And there are reasons for it. And it's not just the other thing, is I feel like I finally see other people with some of the same things. Not exactly like it, but I don't feel like I'm all alone, like I'm this freak walking around.
The minute she's out of a bad reaction, has some good food, boy, she's just right up there, and she's raring to go. We call her every day. Our telephone bill runs $300-400 a month, but we call her every day, and I can tell the minute she answers the telephone what's been going on.
We see people from all over the world. We see them in every type job, and it is exciting to be able to get those people into a state where they can recover and allow their body to get better, and then go into jobs that they can help their fellow man with.
I want to work someday. I don't think I don't give up that hope somewhere along the way that I can get back into my profession. But right now I just get walk in the street, drive a car.
Marriage? Family?
Yeah. For the first time, it seems like it might be possible.
Carla, like other patients who come to the clinic, felt she had at last found the place where her medical problems would be understood. At other medical institutions, she had not fared well, having suffered the consequences of misdiagnosis and unjustified surgery.
They told me I had Crohn's disease. They told me I had peritonitis. They told me I had ruptured my fallopian tubes. I had my appendix were taken out because they said they had ruptured, and when they went in to take them out, they were fine.
Every time she had her asthma reaction, they would have to up the steroids. In fact, she was in the danger zone already, and so she knew and we knew that her life would come to an end pretty soon if she had any more asthma attacks.
I would never do this to a patient, and how you can't do this to me, and they did it, and they said, well, it's like somehow they forget you're a human being somewhere along the way, and so I quit going. It's much like apostle, but you get sicker and sicker and sicker, and then you end up.
At the Ray Clinic, part of the testing procedure involves exposing the patients directly under controlled conditions to the suspect foods or chemicals.
Then when I see her going through these reactions, then it comes home what's really going on. Just can't hardly believe that she's, having reactions to foods and things.
What may be the consequences if illnesses such as Carla's are not properly diagnosed and treated? Dr. Ray.
It really depends on their target organ. For example, if it's their colon or their small intestine, they may end up having to have it removed. If it's their joints, they may end up with crippling arthritis and they have to be on cortisone. Or if it's their heart, they may have irregularities. It could even be fatal with a fatal irregularity. Or if it's their brain, they might end up in a mental hospital and have irreparable neurological damage.
The test meal of sweet potatoes produced a severe reaction in Carla, as had numerous other foods and chemicals. Later, her health began to improve, and she was able to leave the clinic and live on her own. Her mother looked forward hopefully to her eventual recovery.
Well, I just had made up my mind already, then whatever came, that it was God's will, and we'd do the best we could. And I know Carla's a fighter, and she'd somehow we'd get through this.
A few months later, Carla unexpectedly suffered a relapse and had to return to the clinic. Tragically, she died following emergency surgery to implant a tube for intravenous feeding. Betsy Kavanaugh had a very similar illness and was in serious condition when she entered the clinic. She responded positively to the medical treatment, dietary management, and specially controlled environment within the clinic, as described by her husband, Jim Kavanaugh.
Well, I took her into the clinic. She was very ill and getting worse, and by the next day, she was feeling much better. By the third day, it was obvious that she was feeling better than she'd ever felt in her whole life. Her symptoms went away. She could eat. She didn't have to take drugs. It was a tremendous change. It was virtually like a miracle. It happened so fast.
Really overnight, I was 100% better. I was no fever. I started eating the next day, tolerated foods.
Dr. Davy, how do you assess Betsy's treatment at the Ray Clinic?
I don't think there's any doubt that it was life-saving in Betsy's case.
It was really a tremendous relief to see that she got better there. And it was a great source of hope to know that, well, at least there's some place in the world, where she's healthy.
When the Kavanaughs returned home, it soon became clear Betsy could not tolerate the chemicals in the everyday environment of her own house. So it became necessary to build a new one. Jim Kavanaugh tells how they did it.
Well, I decided that the house would have to be one that contained only materials that she could tolerate. So we built an earth-sheltered house to have energy efficiency, heated electrically with a heat pump, and basically we just didn't use any materials that we had any doubts about her ability to tolerate. That meant we had to build a house that had masonry, ceramic tile, and very little wood even, because we couldn't paint it. The walls, floors will all be tile, and after the tremendous success of Dr. Ray's clinic in Betsy's case and how much healthier she was, it became obvious to me that what I needed to do was to build a place to live that was like that. It was just as clear as could be.
It's been wonderful as far as finally having a place to live that I can tolerate. And I feel like now I can get on with my life, and go about the normal things of taking care of the children and cooking the meals. Before, I was just not able to care for my children. I was not able to cook the meals. I couldn't clean the house. I had to have total help every day, 24 hours a day. Now I don't have any help at all, except occasionally someone that might come over and help me clean. But I don't have any regular help at all. And I'm able to care for the 4 children. I'm able to cook the meals. And I'm able to go out shopping and able to tolerate other exposures now because I have a clean place to come back to and recover.
We've lived in the house now almost a year. It'll be a year next month. And in that year, she's probably been sick in bed maybe 3 or 4 days. So it's the longest period of time in our married life that she's basically been functional and able just to do the normal things that a wife and mother does.
Okay, let's go. Go outside.
When this century opened, doctors were just beginning to recognize that asthma and hay fever were allergic diseases. Nearly 60 years were to pass before medical science discovered the mechanisms by which these allergies affect the human body. As this century draws to a close, a new disease, the 20th century disease, has emerged. It too seems to be due to an allergic or altered reaction to our changing environment. How many more years must pass before doctors will be able to unravel the mysteries of this illness and bring relief to those who suffer from it?